Hey everybody, it's Chad Wesley Smith here on the Jug Life Podcast Network. Today we have a special bonus episode. This is the first episode of the Strong Mom podcast by Marisa Inda. Marisa is, of course, a world record-holding powerlifter, as well as being a mother of two wonderful kids. And in this, the Strong Mom podcast, she's going to share her insight and struggles in motherhood, training, nutrition, and more. This first episode features Caroline Weeks, a registered dietitian. They talk kids and calorie counting, how and when to talk nutrition with your kids. So make sure you find the Strong Mom podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. Go subscribe. Look for new episodes every Thursday. Thanks and enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Strong Mom Podcast. I am your host, the mighty mamacita, Marisa. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about kids and calorie counting. How and when do we start talking to our kids about nutrition? And a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, you've been in fitness your whole life, so you have it all together. Your kids probably have a great diet. And I'm here to tell you guys that is not the case with me. I am in the same boat as all of you. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they believe that they can be on the Taco Bell ice cream diet 24/7. It's beyond frustrating. Not to mention, I have had my biggest parenting failures with my daughter. You know, when she's eating, the most crappy stuff all the time, and I'm just sitting there going, stop it. And it's infuriating. And then you get to those moments where you're like, you know what, go ahead and eat it, and you can just be fat. And I'm like, oh my God, did I just say that to my 14-year-old daughter? And, I am right there with you guys. I do not have all the answers. And that is why my special guest today is in the trenches. This is what she does. This is what she's working on. And she's going to help us navigate these murky waters of nutrition. Her name is Caroline Weeks. She's a clinical registered dietitian. She works in the area of pediatrics, and her areas of interest include management of multiple food allergies, Crohn's disease, and cystic fibrosis. And, one of the best parts about her is she is also a raw powerlifter and is a classically trained musician who plays with the Des Moines Symphony. So, hi, Caroline. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on your channel and your podcast. I want to just first and foremost, say that you've been kind of a girl crush of mine for many, many years from following you in your powerlifting training and all of that. So it's really awesome to be able to connect virtually, face-to-face, and have this podcast here to talk about how to raise healthy kids, how to promote good nutrition from a young age, and really instill elements of positive body image, especially for our young boys and girls, because no matter what age, no matter what sex they are, what gender they are, it affects them from a very young age. So that's on tap for today.
Definitely. So, just first and foremost, when I think about nutrition, you think about, okay, well, am I going to teach my kids calorie counting? And there's this big thing with Weight Watchers and how they came out with their teen program. And, while I was looking at that going, okay, this might come across very badly, as I looked into it, I was like, oh, well, what they're saying isn't necessarily terrible. Parents need to be involved. Don't be active. Make sure your schoolwork gets done. So there is some core things that I think, make sense. So what is an RD, and how is that different from the nutritionist or from the people that are on the Weight Watchers, or just from the millions of people on the internet slinging diets? What's the difference?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking, because a lot of people don't quite know how to differentiate between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. And actually, my accrediting body just recently changed our credential to say, instead of just RDN, Registered Dietitian Nutritionist, because all dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians. So what separates us is I have an extensive, academic background studying the biochemistry, the microbiology, food at a very scientific molecular level, and how that affects body metabolism, overall health and wellness, from chronic disease standpoint, from growth and development, from a pediatric standpoint. So I not only have kind of the book smart side of things going for me, but then on top of that, we have to have a clinical residency program, if you will, kind of like doctors do their own residency. Dietitians have to have thousands of hours in clinical practice before actually going out into the field. So, when it comes to the Weight Watchers thing, first of all, they're trying to target a market at a young age so that they capture them for life. Weight Watchers is a moneymaker, okay? There's no way around it. And while some of the concepts, yes, are good, having that family involvement is key. It's really huge. But it does raise some red flags to me. One, because nutrition is supposed to be individualized. It's not a cookie cutter, one fits all approach like the Weight Watchers method can sometimes lean to be. So a dietitian, you meet one-on-one your child, will look at health from a holistic standpoint. So we take a medical history, we factor in medications and potential interactions that food could have with that, such as ADD med. How is that affecting appetite, for better or for worse? Depressive medication, how that can lead to weight gain. We focus on those things. We focus on family feeding relationships and food relationships as a whole. So we take a much more detailed approach and look into food. And there's so much more than just this has this many points and this has this many points. We aim to teach you, okay, this is why you should be eating these things scientifically because X, Y, Z. So that's kind of the difference between just a program that you kind of follow the cues from versus individually meeting with a registered dietitian.
Yeah, and I think that's just a really good distinguishing point. You guys are actually having an education behind it. I think a lot of parents that are trying to get their kids to eat right, they don't have the education or knowledge themselves. So they don't probably know how to approach that as well. So I think when they see Weight Watchers and, they're huge, they're on TV, you see the ads. If you don't know yourself how to eat properly, how are you then going to teach your children? So diving into that, how do you go about doing nutrition for growing children? When's a good time to go see an RD? Is this something that somebody should start when their kids are 2, 5, 8? Wait till they're a teenager? What's a good time, and how does it work as a child is growing?
Yeah, so nutrition changes throughout the child's life cycle. So depending on what age they are, nutrition, energy requirements will be either a lot higher or not so high, depending on what stage of puberty they're in. If they're growing faster or slower. I see babies from infancy, so I help parents introduce foods, solids, kind of transition from breast milk or formula to whole foods, helping families transition through that process, because that can kind of make or break a relationship with food from a very young age. I see patients more so when there's already a problem. So it's kind of like a damage control aspect instead of preventive aspect. So really, the sooner the better to see a registered dietitian. And you don't necessarily have to think that there's a problem to see a registered dietitian, because there's going to be something to learn no matter what. We have so much to offer in terms of dispelling myths about diet or elucidating, I guess, how do I want to say this? Parting the clouds on what supplements are necessary for children. You'd be surprised, how over-supplemented some kids are. So what's necessary, what's worth the money, what's not. There's so many things that a registered dietitian can help you with without a medical diagnosis, if you will.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is I know just from having kids, it's like you're in the hospital, there's no handbook. There's not even really any resources. You're as soon as you have the baby, you're kicked out of the hospital immediately. You're obviously told to breastfeed, but if you can't do this, and then you're having to deal with these slew of problems and not necessarily knowing where to go. I know with my daughter, she had allergies, so the first 3 years were a nightmare of constant crying, stomach aches, trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work. And even going to see your pediatrician, I was never directed to go see an RD. And I had insurance. I had a job that had insurance, and it was like, that was never an option. Like, until I talked to you, I wouldn't know even now that that's an option that you can seek out, or who do you go to talk to find that. So now you find yourself, okay, now I have a daughter who's 14 years old. How do you approach going to, hey, we're going to go see a dietitian and reinforce a good body positive image if, well, why are we going there? Do you think I'm fat? Because those are the things kids ask. So if you tell them, hey, don't eat this, well, why am I fat? And especially with girls and the whole attitude, and it's hard to make them feel good about themselves when essentially it's not like you're not saying they're fat, but why are we going to go see somebody about food? Why do you think I need to change the way that I'm eating? What are you trying to say? So how does a parent navigate that with their child? And if you see parents coming in with their child, what happens in those type of meetings?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question that you raise. And I'd have to think about that, to be honest. The whole preconception or misconception of, oh, I'm seeing a dietitian because I think I'm fat. That's something I'm trying to really dispel and get away from. And I will be honest and say, in my appointments with teens, young girls, I get just tears. Girls just bawl in clinic because they think I'm going to talk about that elephant in the room, their weight. So part of my job, I work in a GI clinic, so I help kids with allergies, whether it's a milk allergy or peanut allergy, whatever. But then I also work in an endocrinology clinic where I see, unfortunately, a lot of overweight and obese children, and also children who have either developed insulin resistance or it's gone so far as to become type 2 diabetes at a very young age. So I am always pro tears. I say, let it out, let's talk about it. Let's just get it out on the table. But I think, as a parent, you have to teach from a young age that the food we put in our bodies helps us grow and be strong. That's what I say. This is going to make you grow big and tall, is what I say to all my kids. So it's not just a weight issue. So food, what we eat, it affects how we feel. It affects how fast we can play soccer and kick a ball. It's the short-term kind of effects of good nutrition. It's not just weight-based subject. Clinic, I try to take it's called PACE approach, or health at every size approach. So I talk with my kids and parents. I say, health is really not what we like on the outside, because we come in all shapes and sizes, and one person can be super skinny, but from the inside, not healthy because they have labs done, they're all wet. What I want us to have as a goal is to get your labs in a better place. I want us to have health from inside out. And for some reason, every time I say that, I see the light bulb go off in these kids' mind, because their blood sugars are too high or their lipid panel is out of whack, even at a young age. And then parents also tend to soften when I say that, and then they all together feel comfortable. And it's no longer about weight or what it look like. I talk about bullies and blow-ups and how this can be an awkward stage, and we just have to get through it. But nutrition and eating well can help us have more energy, can prevent brain fog, can improve our mood. So I really focus on short-term effects with nutrition as opposed to those long-term things, because weight gain doesn't happen overnight, right? So we've got to find a different goal to focus on.
So once you've met with a parent, what does an RD's nutrition plan look like? Obviously everybody is different. I know like Weight Watchers does this point counting. If you were to go see a different style of nutritionist, they might do like, okay, IIFYM or portion control type of stuff. So to get away from like the calorie counting obsessive type of behavior that could potentially happen when you start to like talk about nutrition, because if you're coming from a household where it's huge portion sizes and kids are not used to any type of portion control, when you do start restricting stuff and they start asking questions, this is your portion for today, it's hard to like break away from the potential of your child becoming obsessive about the amounts and counting and weighing. So what does that look like with you, and how do you go about that in talking with parents? What does a typical RD nutrition plan look like?
Definitely. So just like you said, I can fully appreciate the obsessive nature that certain kids can get in, parents can get in when it comes to numbers and calorie counting. So I am 100% opposed to that. That's why I don't really like the Weight Watchers approach, because it kind of fosters inherently this eating disorder style. And I have some statistics on eating disorders I just want to take some time to talk about. Eating disorders start as early as age 5 or 6. I really want that to sink in. That is very,
it's
very
really young.
Very young. And right now, there's at least 30 million people of all ages in the U.S. with an eating disorder. And eating disorders in general have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness out there. So it's a big deal. So because of those statistics, I avoid calorie counting. I avoid any kind of numbers-oriented plan. So instead, I do focus on portion sizes. That is the one number I do focus on. So like, for example, rice or beans is about half to 3/4 of a cup portion, or half a cup of fresh fruit, or a full cup of fruit if it's like berries or something. So I do focus on portion sizes. I will say if it's for an overall general nutrition kind of weight loss or weight management standpoint, I focus on what's called My Plate, which is like our government's plan for healthy eating. So what it focuses on is having every food group represented at mealtime. And that's a great visual for kids because they're learning about food groups. And so then that's a good teaching point to understand, what calcium does for our body and how calcium comes in not just milk, it comes in plant sources, or protein comes in plant sources too. So I try to make sure that they're eating all food groups at all meals, which most kids are not doing right now.
No. It's like I said, it's the taki is the appetizer, and then you go on to dinner.
Oh man, if I had a quarter for every time a kid said they had Takis, I'd be a millionaire.
Seriously.
So to be honest, when it comes to goals, it sounds oversimplified, but simple goals or smart goals that are attainable and simple are what's achievable. So I really start small with my patients. I say, okay, your goal for until next time is to eat all food groups at all meals and to have structured meals and snacks. I do want to get into some of the picky eating navigation and all that, but making sure that a child has structure in their life when it comes to meal times, sitting at the dinner table, having a snack at generally the same time every day, having dinner at generally the same time every day, does wonders for their overall development. So I focus on things like that. I get away altogether from calorie counting, the numbers behind things. I teach the science behind why the child should eat this. And I focus on that. I have them teach that back to me in clinic. I say, okay, so remind me why we're doing this. I talk about how potatoes are sort of digested similarly to white bread or starch. So even though they're vegetables, I sort of lump them into the starchy grain category based on how they affect our blood sugars and insulin resistance and all of that. So I focus more big picture, which works best for kids, regardless of age. I think portion, though, is something that's very tangible, that's very approachable with families. And I will say, cultural practices affect overall success. So Latino families, in general, eat more rice and beans, so the starchy components.
Yep.
So I focus on educating, okay, this is this category, and we need to just rein the portion in slightly and focus more on the protein. And I try to respect cultural differences between, meal times and things like that, because my patient population is largely Latino. So that's just another aspect I try to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up, I'm Latina. You learn from your parents. So, my mom, everything is manteca, which is lard. So she would fry bacon, but then put manteca to fry the bacon. It's like, bacon already has fat. But as you grow up, you're like, well, is this how everybody cooks? I didn't know that you could spray the pan with Pam. So, right. I think it's really important to have like some education for the parents who, it's like, I might make a bowl of spaghetti and your bowl of spaghetti might be completely way more unhealthy than mine just by the way you've prepared it. And it might be the same ingredients, but with added stuff into it. So, when you don't think about those things, like, well, just watching what your parents have done and like you said, culturally, one meal could be very healthy, but it can also be really calorie loaded as well. So when you're doing that, is there a lot of education that goes into it with the parents? Because a lot of times when I talk to parents, it's they come from an overweight background, they're eating very bad, and then they, decide to flip the switch, they get really healthy, they become very obsessive, they start weighing everything, and now their kids are, looking at that going, okay, what's going on here? How does this work? They want to get their kids healthy, but then it turns into this, well, you got to weigh everything too. Is there more education that goes on with the parents in that regard?
Yeah, I always say it's kind of funny because in pediatrics, you have double the clients in the room. So you've got the child and the parent. You're really educating both, and you have to alter your communication style in such a way so that the kid gets what you're saying, but then you can also slightly change what you say so that it's more mature for the parent. You're involved in a fitness kind of macro counting world for bodybuilding competitions, which you used to do, and powerlifting, you've got to maintain a certain weight class, so you have to dial in your nutrition more. I'm gonna get a lot of haters from saying this, but that is disordered eating, when we have to do that. And granted, it's for a specific goal.
Yeah, but kids watch that though.
Right.
Because
kids watch that.
Yeah, but I remember I was doing carb cycling, and my daughter was like in 4th or 5th grade at the time, and she was there was some Mother's Day muffin morning breakfast, and then she raised her hand, she's like, "Don't put my mom down, she doesn't eat carbs."
Oh yeah.
And I was like, no, wait, your mom actually does eat carbs. I said, I'm just carb cycling. And it's funny because now she understands that, but at that age, when you see that growing up, in her mind, well, then carbs are bad, which obviously she doesn't think that because she's eating Takis and Taco Bell. But
sure.
I can see where that can come into play, where kids are watching a competitive parent. Well, we are weighing and measuring. Again, like you said, it's just for maybe those 12 weeks, but it does have to happen in order to reach your end goal.
Right. So that's something you just have to acknowledge and keep in mind. And so I think when it comes to specific, very, very specific measured goals that a parent has for their own nutrition, say a competition or something, I think the best thing to say to the child is, mommy or daddy eats different than you. You're still growing, and we're done growing. So you need to eat different than we do. Okay,
oh, yeah,
so
that's good.
In general, I think that the whole family should eat the same. Okay, so take this competition or prep out of the picture for a second. I truly believe that in order to have success with kids, they've got to have good role models, and so that means everybody eats the same way. And unfortunately, I see it where the kid has altered lipids, but the stepdad doesn't, and he's super skinny and he's super healthy, but can eat whatever he wants by the grace of God. And that's frustrating when there's that gap in support. So there's no magic pill. You just have to stay consistent. You've got to listen to what your dietitian says and try to get everybody on the bandwagon. If you've got that black-white mentality of if there's a sweet in the house, I'm going to eat it, you might need to reconsider what you stock the pantry of. Maybe you need to do a fridge recall, and stock house nutritious foods, and that's it. And leave your kids at home when you grocery shop and have that time yourself so that it's a little more controlled. Because you have to think about the role model you are, what action you're displaying, but you also have to think about the environment that you're creating, making sure that that's a positive one.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And speaking with everyone should eat the same. So what do you do? I'm speaking here of personal experience. This is like a free RD session here. So my daughter got really involved with River Phoenix, like in love with River Phoenix. She found out he was a vegan. Mom, I'm going to be a vegan. And I was just like, that's great. I'm going to still eat meat. You can go on with your vegan lifestyle. I will admit, for those 2 weeks that she lasted as a vegan, that was probably the healthiest she ate because she wasn't, wanting to eat chips and all of the other stuff. She did cave in with bacon, though, so that ended her vegan. But how do you navigate those kind of picky eaters, but also like the eating trends? Well, Mom, I want to be paleo, or I want to try this. Because kids are influenced, especially when they get older, by their friends, by what they see on TV, what they read. And like I said, she read the River Phoenix biography and just fell in love. So.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. So I think she obviously kind of had her own self-discovery with veganism, where she experimented with it, and then she decided, okay, I put in my good 2 weeks, and now I'm done. Bacon's delicious. What I tell parents with picky eating is, I don't want to say have a laissez-faire attitude, but the more that you meddle and the more you get involved and say, eat this, eat your vegetables, You can only eat your dessert if you eat your vegetables. It's going to backfire on you every single time. And it involves so much parental patience and willpower and strength to not control and cajole and bargain over food. But the more you do that, the more they rebel, and they're smart and they know how to play their parents. So that's what I say with picky eating. I just try to encourage calm and controlled environments for feeding. So having dinner with minimal distractions. If a kid doesn't like the food, I always tell parents it takes, because kids will not starve. They won't starve. So they can either eat it or not, and you're not a short order cook, and you make one dinner and that's it. But kids have to try something up to 15 to 20 times to accept it. So I really let that begin. If a kid doesn't like broccoli the first time, don't give up. You got to keep going. But there is kind of a concept in pediatric nutrition that states that it's the parent's responsibility to decide what is fed, at what time, and where. But it's the child's decision to eat it or not, and to eat much of it as he or she wants to. So it's called the division of responsibility. And Ellen Satter is the dietitian and kind of scholar who coined that term. But it's such a simple concept, but it's so true.
Yeah, that's how I think most of us grew up. Like, this is what we're eating. You either eat or you don't. And I think like when you have kids in this new generation, there's so many options. So what do you want? Do you want this, this, and this? You're trying to piece it. No, I don't play that. Then you just don't eat.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the more options you get, the more you don't know what you want. So keep it simple.
Yeah, and I think, too, when you do that, it does force them to try things maybe they would not have necessarily tried just because the name sounds gross. But, it does force them to like, I'll try these mushrooms. Oh, I really like mushrooms. So I think it's really good, just like you said. This option and this one, that's it. Make a choice.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to your daughter and her discovery with veganism, the fact that you let her do it was great. She discovered that on her own. She realized, okay, this isn't for me. Yeah. But yet she probably glad she did it. So I think allowing kids to explore like that and to make sure that they know, okay, you gotta eat these types of foods to make sure you're not deficient in B vitamins, because that's what happens when you're vegan and you're not doing it right. But allowing them to explore it is a great thing.
I think it's good because also it forced her to go to the store with me. This is what I'm going to have. I made her cook her own food, so I'm not trying to cook 3 different meals for people. So she made her own food, and it was actually a really good experience for her. And again, I don't think I'm not like this anti-vegan person. If that's your choice of your food choice, then that's great. Like I said, I think it was actually the healthiest she had eaten up to that point. She's much better now. I do have my moments with her, but that's any 14-year-old. But yeah, I think, like you said, with parents, let them experiment. Obviously, you need to oversee it, but then let them make those choices and go from there. What about supplements and vitamins for kids? What's your take on that? I mean, I give my kids just a multivitamin and call it a day. Is there other things that you might prescribe maybe for a kid who's like underweight? My son, for instance, he's 12 years old. He can eat, the biggest steaks in the world, mashed potato. He does not gain weight. He's literally still like 52 pounds.
Right. Okay. So I think that's great. The fact that you just give a multi and call it a day, that's usually what I tell parents is that's sufficient. Depending if the child has a certain disease or condition, obviously supplementation can change from a clinical standpoint. But generally multivitamin is enough. It's actually not even necessary if they're eating from all food groups and eating a balanced diet. But as you know, sometimes that doesn't happen. So it's good to fill in the gaps. Vitamin D is one that I recommend to children. I live in the Midwest, so we don't obviously get as much sun as you guys do on the West Coast. So that's definitely something I recommend to parents. Calcium is something I do bring up. I take a food first approach as a dietitian always. But if they're not getting enough milk, or they're not drinking milk, or they're not having calcium and ant sources, and what like or dark leafy greens, or tofu. So I do recommend calcium supplementation if I see that as a red flag. I have to take an evidence-based approach as a registered dietitian. What does the research say? And research on supplementation is kind of iffy. In sports performance world, creatine is like A+ supplement performance. Should kids be taking that? Probably not. Probably wouldn't harm them, but I wouldn't recommend that. I'm not opposed to give kids whey protein if it's not in excess. So from a weight gain standpoint, having that shake. There are a lot of oral nutrition supplements out there, like Pediasure, that are Nation's instant breakfast that you could also do. But I think you can take a more natural approach. So making a high-calorie smoothie or something with avocado, heavy whipping cream, whole milk, taking that approach is better for weight gain. And understanding that as long as your child is growing and gaining weight according to their curve on the growth curve, and you don't see any drops or gaps in that's healthy, and that's where they're at. Again, everybody comes in shapes and sizes. Certain siblings grow different, compared to the other, but as long as they're trending zero, then they're in a good place.
Definitely. And what about the socioeconomic stuff associated with like eating good or even seeing an RD for that matter? Typically I think you see people that just maybe say, I don't have the money to feed my kids this way, or I don't have the money to go see an RD. Is an RD something that's covered by insurance? And I know that can vary state to state, so you may not know the answer to that. But how do you address those situations with those families who just may not say, well, I don't have the money to give them, 4 meals a day, or give them the snack, or buy the whey protein?
Yeah. So part of my nutrition assessment with every patient that I see in my clinic is I do sort of a food insecurity screen, if you will. So I present it asking the parents questions. I say, if you don't feel comfortable answering these questions, let me know. That's fine. You can skip over it. But I ask, do you have pots and pans in your kitchen? Do you have working appliances? Have you ever had to cut back on food for yourself to provide for your children in the last few months? Are you on nutrition support programs? So I screen to make sure they're on SNAP with I ask if they know where their local food pantries are, and if not, I cook them with those resources. I show them where their local, support is, whether it's from a church, community center, or a local, institution. So that is something a registered dietitian always keeps in mind. We always help support families. Like you said, it does vary state to state. You're in California, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so California is actually great in terms of, insurance. Some of the Midwestern, southern states, not as good, I'll just be honest, in terms of what's covered. Right now, if your child has diabetes of any kind or any kind of kidney disorders, a dietitian appointment is always covered as far as I know. That being said, what I do is I work it out so I see the patient the same day that the doctor does. We have tandem appointments, and then usually it's covered. So every plan, whether it's private or not, is different. But asking ahead of time if an appointment with an RD is a great, great thing.
And is there follow-ups that happen with that, or is it, okay, I see you, and then you have to wait till maybe the parent contacts you back? How does that work as far as, monitoring the situation?
Yeah, I set active goals. So in order to follow up on those goals, I got to see you again. So I do follow up. Parents are usually always willing to come back and see me. Granted, I adjust that follow-up schedule based on their finances and insurance and all of that. I also do phone follow-ups with families too. So that's something I try to have an ongoing relationship with.
Well, I think it's really awesome what you're doing. I love that you also come from just the powerlifting background, so you understand, people who are involved in sports or certain aspects, like you said, where you're having to weigh your food, or if their kids are involved in sports, because it's crazy to me that a lot of kids, I remember speaking to the water polo team, and none of those kids were even following any type of sound nutrition. Then they go, well, I work out, so I can go and have, the buffet, at Golden Corral after I train. And it's just like, well, you still, you actually, your nutrition should even be better to support your training regimen. So I think I just love talking to people who are in the health field, but then they also have like a training background. So I think that's really awesome. And I love that you took the time just to speak to me on this very first episode of the Strong Mom podcast. So I appreciate that. But where can our listeners find you if they want more information, if they want to pick your brain, or if they want to find maybe an RD in their area? Is there a network that you can refer them to?
Yes. So I try to use social media for the better and to educate about pediatric nutrition in general. So I'm very active on Instagram. You can find me. My handle is Caroline C. Weeks RD. And so you can follow me there. I post a lot on my stories. I engage my audience a lot there. I'm also going to probably look into taking some online clients in the future, get a website going. So that's kind of still in the works. But for now, home base is Instagram. For parents who are looking to find an RD in their area, they can go to my accrediting body's website, which is eatright.org. And there is a search bar where you can find your local dietitian if they are registered there. Otherwise, just go to your local hospital and clinic and ask, because usually all of those staff dietitians, and they're willing to work with the communities.
That's awesome. And then you also have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I do. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about some career type stuff for dietitians because it's such a unique field. It's really competitive to become a dietitian, but I'm looking to create more general content. Right now, for example, I'm doing a challenge. I'm doing a specific diet to mimic what it's like to have Crohn's disease, and I'm documenting that via vlog. So I do a lot of kind of crazy fun stuff to just be the best clinician I can. So give me a follow on both those avenues.
That's really awesome. I just really appreciate you coming on. I want to thank all my listeners out there for listening through this first episode. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you can come hang out with me every Thursday, and I will be talking about topics like this, things that have to do with my kids personally. As a parent, it might make you want to have kids or might turn you off from having kids. I don't know, but you can find me at Marisa Inda on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find the podcast at the Strong Mom podcast.com on the internet, and on Instagram at Strong Mom, and on Twitter at Strong Mom Pod. So follow me on all of those places as well. Follow Carolyn. I think it'd be really cool if you did some online stuff, because I know there's lots of parents who, would probably be interested in working with you and again, because you come from a sporting background, and that you're also just so dedicated that you would do a diet that somebody that with Crohn's has to follow. So I think that's really awesome.
Oh, well, Marisa, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And that's this week's episode of the Strong Mom Podcast. Don't forget to tune in every Thursday, subscribe, rate, and review.